Hello and welcome to my channel, Latin with Stephen. In this video, I propose to talk a little bit about grammar in general terms. So I'm mainly going to do this in English, but I will use some Latin examples. So this is mainly for people out there who want to learn a bit more about how grammar works and learn some of the terminology beyond the basic noun, verb and adjective, just so that you are able to analyze and break down a sentence and identify the various components, which exercise in itself is very, very useful when you're learning a foreign language, and particularly with a highly inflected language like Latin. So I think this may fill a gap for those people who haven't got a lot of linguistic expertise or haven't really studied grammar formally. This may help to just provide you with some knowledge that you can hopefully then implement in your language studies. So, as I say, I will use some Latin examples, but you can indeed follow this even if you're not particularly studying Latin, if it's not your main focus. I will mainly talk about verbs, but before I do so, I just want to introduce two terms that are quite general, and they are the terms subject and predicate. And in any sentence, so generally speaking, you will have a subject and a predicate. So what do those mean? Subject is simply the person or thing about which or about whom you're saying something. All right? And then the predicate is that which is said about the subject. So let's take a simple sentence. The boy reads the book in the garden. The boy reads the book in the garden. So what's the subject there, guys? The subject is the boy, because that's the person in this case about whom I'm saying something. The boy, the subject. And what am I saying about him? I say, reads a book in the garden. So that is the predicate. All of those words form the predicate because that is the information given about the subject. The boy reads the book in the garden. So there are multiple words there. We've got a verb, reads, we've got a noun, a definite article, the book, and then we've got a description of place, but that's all the predicate. The boy reads the book in the garden. For the Latinists out there, let's just translate that. What's your subject? Nominative case, because he's doing the action. Puer, librum, accusative, reads the book, librum, in horto, in the garden, legit, reads. Puer librum in horto legit. And we know that the word for book must go in the accusative case because that's a direct object, and that's why it's librum. I could very well reorder the sentence in Latin and say librum puer in horto legit, and it's the same thing, exactly the same meaning, because the meaning in a Latin sentence is not constituted by the order of the words, but by the endings of the words. So those of you who've been learning Latin with me or elsewhere will, I think, appreciate that by this point. Let's just take another example. The slave girls are working in the kitchen. The slave girls are working in the kitchen. So subject of that sentence. The slave girls, because that's who we're talking about, who we're saying something about. In Latin, ancillai. What's the predicate? Are working in the kitchen. Because that's all the information that's said about the subject. Alright, so subject, the slave girls, ancillai. Predicate, are working in the kitchen. In culina laborant. In culina laborant. Okay, so subject, and then what's said about it is the predicate. So just useful to know those basic terms in case they crop up. I think that's fairly straightforward. Let us now go to talk about verbs. A verb can appear in the infinitive form, or it can appear as a finite verb. Those are opposites. So the infinitive, you're probably familiar with that, is the kind of universal general verb before you apply it to a person or apply it to a tense, before you limit it. Now, infinite is actually from Latin. The verb finire is to limit or to bound something. So if it's infinite, it's unlimited, it's not bound, not restricted, not limited or reduced in any way. It's not been applied to anything yet. In English, the infinitive is with to eat, to go, to feel, to love. The generics, we've not done. I can't say I to love. All right, so that's what we mean by the infinitive. Let's take the Latin to work. That's an infinitive. It's laborare. So those who've been learning Latin with me will know that there are different types of verb, different conjugations, and in the infinitive form they can end in are or ere or ire. So this one, laborare, is one type. It's a first conjugation infinitive. So if that's the infinitive, to work, I suppose the opposite is what we call the finite verb. And finite, therefore, is a verb that is limited or is bound in a certain way. It is attached to a person, therefore has a number, singular or plural, and it is limited in time. It could be present tense, future tense, past tense. So, for instance, I work in the forum. I work in the forum. Well, I is the subject. Work in the forum is the predicate. That's what's being said about me, the subject. And the verb is work. And it's not an infinitive, not I to work. That's not correct, is it? It's I work. So I've matched it with I, first person singular, in the present tense. So it's been limited, if you will. That's finire, finite. And the Latin will be laboro, ego laboro, I work, or I'm working. Ego in foro, in the forum, laboro. Every sentence, every clause, which is a part of a sentence, will have to have a finite verb in order to make sense. Okay? So it can be in any tense. So another one might be, if we take the infinitive to love, amare, but you can't say the girl to love. You have to conjugate it, make it a finite verb. So the girl loves, blah blah blah, would be puella amat. Puella is the subject, amat, loves, is the predicate. Okay, that's what's being said about the subject, although we expect a bit more information so that it would make sense, wouldn't we? But I think you get the drift. So that's infinitive, general, universal form of the verb before you apply it or limit it. Finite verb is when it's been limited in tense and person. So two other distinctions we can make in terms of verbs are between transitive verbs and intransitive. There's fancy words here. Please don't be put off by the terminology, guys. Actually, I think it's really useful to learn these things. There's a tendency, certainly here in England, and I think English-speaking environments, to shy away from terminology and precision. And I would counsel the opposite, actually. I think the more precise we can be, and the more we can narrow something down, refine it, and get an exact definition, then we are able all the more to analyse and know what we're doing with language. So I think it's very useful. So please don't be put off by the terminology. Just embrace them, and then you'll be able to use them when you're analysing and referring to language and to sentences. So what's a transitive verb? A transitive verb is one which expresses a direct object. The verb is geared towards an object. It necessitates an object, which will go into the accusative case in Latin. So let us take, for instance, the verb to put. A synonym would be to place. Now, if I say, yesterday I put... Well, that's not complete, is it? It doesn't make any sense, because the verb to put, by its very nature, requires something more. It requires an object, and then probably a place or some kind of location, direction. I put the book on the table. Right, that makes sense. I put what? I put the book, object. So the verb to put requires an object. It's transitive. And the same is true in Latin. The verb is ponere. First person, I put, pono. If we put something back in time, in English we say we postpone, right? I want to postpone the meeting. Well, there we're just using Latin. Post is after or behind, and pono is put. So postpone is from ponere, which is to put or to place. The opposite would be antipono. Anti spelled A-N-T-E, meaning before, not opposite. That's A-N-T-I. A-N-T-E is before. So I put before, bring forward, or even it can mean to prefer something. Bring to the top of the list. So antipono versus postpono. But pono is the putting or the placing. And again, you can't just put pono, ego pono, I put what? Doesn't make sense. So you need an object. It's transitive verb. For instance, I put the book on the table. Librum, accusative. Pono, librum is my object, in mensa, on the table. Librum in mensa pono. Ego, subject. Librum in mensa pono. And the librum in mensa pono is the predicate, because it's what's said about me. I do that action. Let's take another one, the verb to send. Oh, what's your sister doing? Oh, she's just sending. Sending what? How was your day yesterday? Oh, it was great. I sent. It's a nonsense, isn't it? The verb necessitates an object. The verb in Latin is mittere, third conjugation. Mitto, I send. Mittere. So, for instance, the master sends the letter. The letter is the object, direct object. And it goes into the accusative case. Dominus. Epistulam, an epistle, a letter. Mittit. He sends it. So subject, dominus. Epistulam mittit, predicate. Mittit is the finite verb because it's been limited to a tense and a person, as opposed to mittere, which is the infinitive, which you couldn't use here. You can't say dominus mittere. Dominus mittit, the master sends. And it happens also to be a transitive verb because it requires a direct object. So if that's transitive, you can probably guess that intransitive is a verb that does not govern or require an indirect object, a direct object, excuse me. It may often be a kind of state. So, for instance, going, any kind of motion generally doesn't involve an object. You might have an adverb, you're going to a place, but not an object. A nice example is the verb to sleep. In Latin, the infinitive is dormire, to sleep. You can't sleep something. You can sleep in a place. You can sleep for 8 hours. You can sleep well, soundly. But those are all just adverbs, adding information about how, when, where. It's not an object. It's not the same as I send the book or I send the letter. And you can't sleep something. It's not possible. So that's an intransitive verb. It's always intransitive. No object. So, for instance, the girl sleeps in the bedroom. Subject, the girl, nominative. Puella. Dormit, from dormire, fourth conjugation. In cubiculo. Puella, in cubiculo dormit. Puella, subject. In cubicula dormit. Okay, sorry, I had a bit of a technical issue there. Puella in cubiculo dormit. What else? Yeah, the verb to go or to hurry to a place is contendere, third conjugation. So, contendo, he or she contended. So the gladiator goes or hurries to the arena. Well, it's not an object, it's just to is a preposition, the place where you're going. It's not the same as a direct object. And so it's intransitive. Gladiator contendit ad arenam. Ad is your preposition, followed by a noun, ad arenam. That's a kind of adverbial. It's telling you where you're going. Gladiator contended, intransitive. Now, I should say, whilst it's true that some verbs are always transitive, such as the ones we've met, and some verbs are always intransitive, there are a great number of verbs that can be used either way, depending on the context. In which case, it is more correct to say a verb is being used transitively with an object, or intransitively without an object in this particular case. I can quite correctly say in English, we usually eat at 6 o'clock. We prefer to eat in the kitchen. Now, there's no direct object involved there, but the sentences are perfectly correct. So they're intransitive. What I could also say is, I often eat an apple. Every morning, we eat bread. So in that case, you've got eat plus direct object transitive, where in the former sentences we had just adverbial phrases giving information about where or when, but it's not an object. So that verb can go either way. Some other examples just in English for you guys. He broke the glass. He broke is the verb, finite verb in the past tense. The glass is the object. He did it, he affected, influenced the glass, he broke it. Transitive. But you could also say the glass broke. In that case, the broke, there's no object. It kind of did to itself. It happened of itself. It's intransitive. Likewise, the sun melted the snow. The sun is the subject. It melted the snow. It affected the snow. It did it to it. Transitive. The snow is the object. But the snow melts, or the snow melted. There's no object, it just happens. It's intransitive. So you see some verbs can go either way depending on the context. So just be aware of that. But it's useful to just understand this terminology. And so when you're reading and you're analysing a sentence, then you can say, right, present tense, finite verb, transitive verb in this instance, direct object, accusative case, and you can label things and break them down with absolute precision. And when you can do that, you're on your way to being in a position to read a language like Latin with some degree, with some facility. What else can I mention to you? So if we just go back to the intransitive verbs, an intransitive verb is, for instance, the verb to be or to become. Now, sometimes these verbs will be sufficient in themselves to form the predicate. For instance, fly. The bird flies or is flying. Full stop. End of sentence. It's fine. It makes sense. But with a verb like to be, my father is, it's not quite complete, is it? So what we call these are intransitive verbs of incomplete predication. Remember, the predicate is that which is said about the subject. So we need more. And what you add to it is what's called a complement. So for instance, my father is a doctor. The verb is to be. Present tense is finite verb. Okay, I've limited it. It's intransitive. You can't possibly have an object after the verb to be. My father is a doctor. The doctor's the same person as he, right? It's not someone else. Whereas if I say, I know a good doctor, I know him or her, that's different. It's object. I'm affecting that person with my knowing. But I just say, he is a doctor. It's the same person. So it's what we call a complement. The complement noun in this case, which is part of the predicate. Predicate noun. Because it's relating back to the same person. And it would be, if it were a noun, the same case, the nominative case, as my father. Because it's the same person. Alright, it's just being something. Or becoming something. So we can do that one in Latin. My father is a doctor. Pater. Pater meos. Meos pater. Est medicus. Pater medicus est. Pater is the subject. Medicus est is your predicate. And we've got est, which is an intransitive verb. Finite intransitive verb. And the medicus is part of the predicate. It's the complement here. A complement noun. Okay. Let's do one more. The king becomes angry. So we've had being, is, and now becoming. Well, that's also an intransitive verb. It's not going to necessitate or involve a direct object. But we need further information. Becomes what? The king becomes angry. Well, who's angry? It's still the king. It's still the same person. So it's not an object. It's not an accusative. It will still be nominative. But it's a complement. And this time it's a complement adjective. It's part of the predicate. Rex is the king. Iratus, masculine. Fit, F-I-T, becomes. Rex iratus, fit. Subject, rex, nominative case. Iratus fit, predicate. Made up of what? Fit, becomes, is a finite verb, intransitive, with iratus as part of the predicate. It's the complement, and it's a complement adjective because it's just complementing, it's referring back to the subject, and therefore in the same case. So there we have it, guys. We've got subjects and predicates. We've got infinitive and finite verbs, and intransitive versus transitive verbs. I hope this has been useful. I like this kind of thing. I find it very empowering to know all these terms and to feel very confident about all the nuts and bolts and bits and pieces of a sentence. I hope that is the way you will feel after learning this. You may need to go through it again and make some notes. Any questions, just feel free to ask in the comments. I shall do my very best to answer. And if I'm not certain, I shall look it up. But there you go. So I thought I'd just do a one-off kind of grammar little presentation workshop before getting back into the nitty-gritty of the actual Latin. So please give me a like if you enjoyed this video. Feel free to comment. Let me know where you're watching this from, which languages you're learning, if you're doing Latin, how long have you been doing Latin, what are your reasons for doing it. Let me know, guys, and please subscribe if you haven't already, and hope to see you in the next video. Okay, thank you, take care, bye-bye.